Brian, how you doing this morning?
Hey guys, yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Good to talk to you. It's been a little while. I know you've been busy. Brian does camps and works with kickers pretty much all over the country. But Brian, I wanted to bring you on to sort of give us some 101. Nick Saban, in some of his recent comments, he's been careful not to just isolate the kicker position. Instead, he's mentioned the operation. When a coach talks about the operation, Brian, in terms of field goal kicking and extra points, what is he talking about?
From the field goal standpoint, the operation, you're talking about a three-man unit, primarily specialist-wise. You're talking about the long snapper, the holder, and the kicker. But, holistically, you're talking about, obviously, the O-line, and the ends. So it's not just the kicker. It's not just the holder. You got to block. Got to get the snap back and still execute from, just a three-man standpoint, not just on the kicker,
So, when you look at Alabama specifically, Brian, this is the situation. I just talked about it in the previous segment. Replacing a 4-year starter at snapper, replacing a 3-year starter at holder, along with a 3-year starter at the kicker position. Should it really be any surprise that maybe this isn't going as smoothly as they would like right now?
Yeah, the odds are going to be against them just because of the experience. However, we've seen with different programs where true freshmen come in or walk-ons that have been a part of the program come in and are successful. So it just depends on what happens, kind of that first game or two, to kind of see what happens and then make adjustments as needed.
If you're opening with an opponent like Florida State, though, Brian. What type of approach are you going to take to selecting a kicker if it's close? Let's say you've got 2 or 3 guys that are in that mix, but if it comes down to kind of splitting hairs, which way do you lean when you've got an opponent like Florida State on the other side?
There's a lot of speed from Florida State, and we all know that. So operation time is going to be important. So when you're looking at kickers, depending on the amount of kickers that are competing in camp, you may have a guy that's 85, 90% in camp, but if his operation time is 1.4 seconds, 1.35 seconds to get off, coaches value that, not only at the college, but also at the NFL level. They value that just as much as you making kicks. So, playing against an opponent like Florida State, they're going to have a 1.2 second get-off time from snap to kick just to make sure it doesn't get blocked off the edge. Then we take on components like the trajectory, or are they getting the ball up? So they got athletes on the other side of the ball there that are going to jump up the middle too. So, trajectory of the ball flight is going to be important. It's going to be critical. So it's not just someone that can just hit 55, 60-yard field goals, off the field goal stand or off the sticks, as we call it. I'm sure Coach Saban and staff are looking at all the components that come with kicking, and I know operation time is going to be critical. And then looking at ball flight and making sure we can get the balls inside 40. Let's make sure we can make our kicks inside 40 with good operation and good trajectory, is my perception, my opinion, that they'll be looking at before they start thinking of, the long ball kicks.
You've been through this. Joseph Bulovas for Alabama is a true freshman coming in here. You did it at Ball State as a college kicker. What was the biggest adjustment for you, Brian, going into that situation with a MAC program?
The biggest adjustment was getting used to a new holder and new long snapper. That's important. Mm-hmm. You look at the NFL level, Will Lutz, the guy that I've worked with that was at Georgia State, and you've been a part of him too. One thing that made it easy for him is once he got to the Saints, Thomas Morstead is, a veteran in the NFL. So as soon as he got there, he felt comfortable with his holder. So that's going to be an issue with the Tide is, the kicker that's going to be starting is going to have to be working with a holder that hasn't had a whole lot of game experience, if any. Snapper, same situation. So getting that relationship down with the long snapper and the holder is going to be crucial just from a kicker standpoint. And that was my biggest adjustment, is going from my high school snapper and holder that I was with for 3 years to brand new 2 snappers to work with and 2 holders to work with as a true freshman in college. And then once I developed that relationship, not on the field, but even off the field, things started to work out well, probably, by game 2, game 3 of my true freshman campaign.
Now, you mentioned the holder position and how it relates to the Saints right now, and Will Lutz, a guy that you've worked extensively with now in the National Football League. Morstead's a punter, if I'm correct. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
So the relationship between Lutz and Morstead is constant.
Correct.
As you know, as a specialist, that's who your world pretty much centers on, is your fellow specialist. So the time they spend together has to help on the field, even the relationship they have. Now, at Alabama, there's been kind of a mix of the type of personnel that's been used at that holder spot. We've seen quarterbacks, we've seen a defensive back, we've seen a punter at other times. What would be your preference if you're a kicker? Would you because quarterbacks have to go play quarterback, defensive backs have to go play defensive back. So you don't get that same time with those guys as holders as you do with another specialist like a punter, right?
Definitely. Yeah. If the punter has really good hands and they're really confident doing it, the coaching staff sees that, and the kicker, sees that, and they're comfortable with that, that would be the number one go-to. We've seen it the last couple of years at the college level. We're finally seeing punters get a chance to hold and have that opportunity. 10, 15 years ago, there weren't a whole lot of punters holding for kickers as we see today. So it's nice to see that relationship. Now, however, quarterbacks typically have really good hands, just like wide receivers and, the rare DB or there. So if it's someone that's just naturally good at it, typically they've done it at the high school level if they were, a position player. It just depends on the kicker. For me personally, when I was at Ball State, I was fortunate to have a couple quarterbacks hold for me, and they were just so natural at it. But if I had a preference, if I had to choose between a punter that was really good at it and a quarterback that was really good at it, I would take the punter because I'm going to be with that person, 90% of the work, the work week.
I guess some coaches like the quarterback aspect because it opens up things in the fake game maybe a little bit more. And if something goes wrong with the snap, they may be or would be more adept or more apt to make something happen. Alabama in that 2013 Auburn game, the kick six got caught with a punter on the field as the holder, didn't have, I guess what's perceived to be a more athletic guy. I don't think it would have mattered. But it's interesting to try to sort through the different types of personnel that teams look at for that holder spot. As for the snapper, Alabama has a true freshman snapper in Thomas Fletcher. What's his biggest adjustment coming into SEC football?
You're going to have different block adjustments. You're in the SEC. So, there's going to be, obviously, you got two huge guards on you. You're not used to that at the high school level by any means. Going to the college level, whether it's a mid-major or even Division II program. But you're at Alabama. So you got two guards that are going to have their inside leg pretty heavy on your legs, when they're interlocked there on the line. So that's a huge adjustment that true freshman snappers have to get used to. And then obviously dealing with nose tackles and defensive tackles coming in on the A and B gaps there. So, what happens is these guys get so fixated on having to block, or just different sensations and feelings in their legs. Sometimes they forget about the snap. So what I tell guys is, look, your number one priority is to get the snap back where it needs to be. Number two priority is then to help assist in blocking. So, snap first and then block. The first couple games you're probably going to get put on your back several times. That's just something they have to get used to, and that's just part of the process,
And there are some rules, I think, that don't they help protect the snapper more than maybe they did in the past? I know even this year, we had seen the last few years, Ashawn Robinson did it here a couple of years ago, guys jumping the line of scrimmage on kicks, and the NCAA, beginning with this season, has done away with that. But it's interesting stuff. We're talking with Brian Jackson of Team Jackson Kicking. You can give Brian a follow on Twitter at Team Jackson Kick. Does great work with specialists around the Southeast specifically, but also across the country. Now, I got to ask you this too, Brian, before we let you go here. Your trick shot videos, man. If you haven't seen some of this stuff that Brian does, it's insane. It's a lot of fun. And I know the little one, your son now, I saw him on an ESPN Sports Center tweet the other day for a trick shot, for crying out loud.
Yeah. Yeah. I started doing it, a couple of years ago with fellow kicking coaches in the industry were doing it, and honestly, I was starting to do it because I needed to get a little cardio up because, started gaining a little bit of weight. So, once you start kicking it and missing, you got to run and get the balls. But then, one of our students at a camp that you may have seen online, it went viral. And so I tried a couple and it went viral. And next thing you know, I had new clientele interested in training with me, and then also had new opportunities with different agencies for advertisements. And then, my 3-year-old Corbin Jackson, we started doing some trick shots with him with a soccer ball and did some little ping pong shots. And yeah, I think he's made SportsCenter and ESPN probably 7 or 8 times. I got lucky just to get my one time.
Yeah, I kind of remember all that starting. I think we were all at a camp, or it was beginning to get into it down there in Mobile back before the 2015 season, and absolutely, this stuff has gone crazy. It's gone viral. Well, Brian, as always, my man, appreciate you providing us with some knowledge into an aspect of the game that, quite frankly, doesn't get talked about enough. And now that Nick Saban has sort of brought it to the surface, really wanted to get you on and give us that perspective from a professional viewpoint, which Brian certainly is, and look forward to keeping up with the trick shots and all the great work you do with specialists around the country. Thanks a lot, Brian.